August 15th, 1974, Hong Kong. In the stifling heat of the Great Wall Hotel, a piercing scream shatters the morning silence coming from room 5. When security forces the door open, they find a maid on the floor, paralyzed by terror, pointing at the bed. What lies on those sheets is not just a murder victim. It is a message of pure, unadulterated hatred. A woman's body, stripped naked, her face surgically removed, her identity erased in a bloodbath. This is the story of the Faceless Corpse of Kowloon, a case of obsession, butchery, and a supernatural twist that would terrify the police force. Viewer discretion is advised. Please subscribe to Case X as we uncover the truth. The morning of August 15th, 1974, began like any other humid, oppressive summer day in the bustling district of Kowloon, Hong Kong. At the Great Wall Hotel, a modest establishment that often catered to transient guests and hourly lovers, the staff was going through the motions of the morning shift change. Dan May, a front desk clerk, was preparing to clock out. She handed the shift log over to her replacement, Chen Guan, with a specific instruction. The guest in room 5 had requested a wake-up call. It was a standard procedure in the hospitality industry. Guests checked in, guests checked out, and life moved on. But as the clock ticked past 11:05 in the morning, the routine was about to be shattered. Chen Guan walked down the hallway, the carpet muffling her footsteps. She knocked on the door of room 5. Silence. She knocked again, louder this time. Still, there was no response. Assuming the guest was a heavy sleeper, or perhaps had already left without checking out, she used her master key to push the door open. The air inside the room was heavy, carrying a metallic tang that hit the back of her throat instantly. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, a horrific scene unfolded. On the bed, a figure was curled up in a fetal position, wrapped loosely in the bedsheets. It was motionless. Chen Guan stepped closer, her heart pounding a nervous rhythm against her ribs. She reached out and gently pulled back the sheet. She screamed. The sound tore through the hotel corridor. On the mattress lay the naked body of a woman, but to call it a body seemed almost clinical given the devastation. The victim had no face. Where her features should have been, there was only raw, exposed muscle and bone. Her eyelids, her nose, her lips, and her ears had been sliced away with terrifying precision. It was a mask of red gore. Panic erupted. Hotel staff rushed to the room, followed moments later by the sirens of the Royal Hong Kong Police. The scene was secured, yellow tape crisscrossing the doorframe as detectives stepped into the nightmare. The forensic examination began immediately. The victim appeared to be roughly 30 years old, standing about 4 feet 11 inches tall with a slender build. The brutality inflicted upon her was not limited to her face. Her breasts had been severed and her hair had been hacked off in jagged clumps. Her body was a map of violence, covered in deep purple bruising that suggested a struggle or perhaps torture prior to death. The preliminary cause of death appeared to be strangulation, likely with a ligature or bare hands. Before the mutilation began, Detective Chen Xinjiang, the lead investigator on the case, later spoke to the press about that first walkthrough. He described the white bed sheets as being soaked so thoroughly they looked like a canvas painted in crimson. Scattered across the mattress were small, fleshy remnants, pieces of the victim that had been discarded like trash. The killer had not just murdered this woman, he had attempted to obliterate her existence. By removing her face and distinct features, he had stripped her of her humanity and her identity. This posed an immediate and massive problem for the investigation. Without a face, and in an era before DNA profiling was available, identifying the victim would be a monumental task. The crime scene itself was bafflingly clean in terms of forensic evidence. Despite the carnage on the bed, there were no bloody footprints leading to the door. No murder weapon was left behind. No fingerprints were found on the door handles or the bedside table. It was as if a phantom had drifted in, slaughtered the woman, and drifted out. One gruesome theory immediately surfaced. The police noticed that certain parts of the victim's tissue were missing entirely. Had the killer flushed them down the toilet to dispose of the evidence? Detectives ordered a plumber to the scene. They dismantled the toilet and the drainage pipes, searching through the sewage for any trace of human tissue. They found nothing. This absence of evidence was chilling. It implied that the killer was not in a frenzied panic after the murder. On the contrary, he was cold, calculated, and methodical. He had taken the time to clean himself up, perhaps even wiping down surfaces, before collecting the severed parts of his victim and taking them with him. The police turned their attention to the hotel staff, desperate for a lead. They interviewed Dan May, the clerk who had checked the couple in the previous night. According to Dan May, the nightmare began around 1 a.m. on August 15th. A man and a woman had walked into the lobby, fingers interlaced, acting like a typical affectionate couple. The man identified himself as Mr. Liang. Witnesses described him as tall and broad-shouldered, a physically imposing figure. The woman beside him was dressed provocatively, wearing heavy makeup and lipstick that looked like a deep crimson stain. She chain-smoked, her demeanor suggesting she might be a sex worker, or perhaps a woman who lived on the edge of the city's nightlife. After paying for the room, Dan May had escorted them personally to room 5 and handed over the key. That was the last time the woman was seen alive. At 6 o'clock the following morning, the man Mr. Liang walked out of the room alone. He approached the front desk, calm and collected. He told the staff that he had to head to work early, but asked them to let his girlfriend sleep in. He specifically requested they wake her up after 11 o'clock. He walked out the front door, blending into the early morning street traffic. But then, he did something that chilled the detectives to the bone. Moments after leaving, Mr. Liang returned. He walked back into the hotel lobby, looking slightly annoyed with himself. He told the clerk he had forgotten his wallet in the room. He went back up to room 5, back to the room where a mutilated corpse was currently lying in the bed, and emerged a short time later, wallet in hand. He then left the hotel again, vanishing like a ghost into the wind. This detail revealed the psychology of the killer. To return to the scene of the crime, to walk past the body he had just butchered simply to retrieve a wallet, showed a total lack of fear or remorse. He was a psychopath, operating with ice-cold nerves. Detective Chen Xinjiang and his team were under immense pressure. The brutality of the Great Wall Hotel murder had leaked to the press, and the city was on edge. But they had almost nothing to go on. The hotel, like many small guest houses in the 1970s, had lax security. There was no requirement for guests to show identification cards. The name Liang was likely a fake. The police circulated a composite sketch of the suspect based on the descriptions from Dan May and other staff members. They plastered the image across Kowloon, targeting bus stops, ferry terminals, and restaurants. But without a photograph or a real name, it was a shot in the dark. The sketch was generic, a broad face, a stern expression, features that could belong to thousands of men in Hong Kong. Weeks passed. The investigation stalled. The newspapers, hungry for sensationalism, kept the story on the front page, speculating about a serial killer or a triad hit. Rumors swirled through the tea houses and markets. The Faceless Corpse became a ghost story used to scare young women at night. Then, the taunting began. The killer, perhaps emboldened by the police's failure or seeking recognition for his work, decided to reach out. The editorial office of the Hong Kong Express received an anonymous letter. The writer claimed to be the killer, calling himself the Black Wolf. The tone of the letter was arrogant, dripping with mockery. The Black Wolf ridiculed the police for their incompetence. He wrote that he had left plenty of clues, yet the stupid detectives were running around in circles. He challenged them to find him. Police analysts pored over the letter. Was this a prank? A hoax by someone seeking attention? Or was this truly the voice of the monster? On August 17th, 2 days after the murder, the phone rang at the Mong Kok police station. A deep, rasping voice asked to speak to the investigators. The man on the other end identified himself again as the Black Wolf. "You are looking in the wrong places," the voice sneered. "Go back to the room. Check the air conditioner. There are 12 things there that you are looking for." Before the police could trace the call, the line went dead, leaving only the sound of a manic, arrogant laugh echoing in the receiver. Detective Chen wasted no time. He led a team back to room 5 of the Great Wall Hotel. The room had been cleaned, but the air conditioning unit remained untouched. The police dismantled the casing of the AC unit. Inside, hidden within the vents, they found them. Wrapped in plastic and shoved into the machinery were the missing pieces of the victim: the severed ears, the nose, the lips, the breasts. The killer hadn't flushed them. He had hidden them in the room as a twisted trophy or a final puzzle for the police to solve. It was a gruesome discovery, but it was the breakthrough they needed. With the recovered facial features, forensic artists and morticians began the macabre task of reconstruction. They stitched the face back together, piece by piece, trying to give the victim her name back. On August 18th, the police released a reconstructed photograph of the victim to the major newspapers. The headline asked a simple, haunting question: "Do you know this woman?" The city held its breath. Early the next morning, on August 19th, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chi walked shakily into the police station. She was clutching a copy of the newspaper, her hands trembling. She told the desk sergeant that her daughter had been missing for several days. Detective Chen sat down with Mrs. Chi. "Are you sure?" he asked gently. "The photo, it is difficult to look at." The old woman nodded, tears streaming down her face. "A mother knows," she whispered. "I raised her. I know her eyes. I know the shape of her face. That is my daughter." Mrs. Chi explained that her daughter had lived a hard life, but they were close. The moment she saw the picture, a mother's intuition told her the worst had happened. Detective Chen immediately ordered his subordinates to escort Mrs. Chi to the morgue for a formal identification. The walk to the cold storage room was long and silent. When the sheet was pulled back, Mrs. Chi collapsed in grief. The identity of the faceless woman was finally confirmed. Her name was Liu Fumin. Liu Fumin was 34 years old. In her youth, she had been a beauty, a woman who turned heads wherever she went. In 1958, she had fallen in love with a sailor named Dong and married him. They had 2 daughters, Lu Yonglian and Lu Ming. But life was not kind to Liu Fumin. The marriage crumbled, and she and her husband divorced. In a break from tradition, Liu Fumin took custody of the children, and they took her surname. She moved in with her elderly mother, Mrs. Chi, into a cramped, run-down apartment behind the Flower Building in the Suen-Wan district. Life was a struggle for survival. The rent was 400 yuan a month, about $55 at the time, a steep price for a single mother with no formal education. Her mother, Mrs. Chi, was too old to work, and the government welfare checks were barely enough to buy rice, let alone pay the rent. Desperation drove Liu Fumin to the edge. She tried gambling, hoping for a quick windfall to save her family, but only found herself in deeper debt. Finally, coerced by friends and cornered by poverty, she made the choice that many desperate women in Hong Kong made during that era. She entered the sex trade. By 1973, Liu Fumin had adopted the professional name Jinling. She started working as a masseuse at the Roman barber shop, a front for illicit services. She bounced from parlor to parlor, eventually landing at a salon on Nelson Street. She was the sole breadwinner, selling her body to keep a roof over her mother and daughter's heads. On the night of August 14th, around 11 p.m., Liu Fumin received a call at the salon. It was a client booking an outcall, a date outside the shop. Usually, the women did not take out calls unless it was a regular, trusted customer. Liu Fumin told the other girls she would be back soon. She never returned. Detective Chen realized that this was the key. If Liu Fumin agreed to leave the safety of the salon late at night, the killer was not a stranger. he was a regular. He was someone she knew. The investigation shifted gears instantly. This was no longer a hunt for a ghost. It was a hunt for a client. Detective Chen requested the client logbook and the contact list from the salon on Nelson Street. He began working through the names, calling them one by one, filtering through the seedy underbelly of Kowloon's nightlife. After hours of grueling police work, the list was whittled down to 4 potential suspects who matched the description of the tall, broad-shouldered man seen at the hotel. One name stood out: Liang Zhaoping. Liang Zhaoping lived in a rented apartment in the city, not far from the police station. The description given by the hotel staff matched him almost perfectly. Detective Chen gathered his team. They were done waiting for phone calls from the Black Wolf. It was time to knock on his door. Detective Chen Xinjiang stood before the door of the apartment, his hand resting instinctively near his holster. The address led to a cramped unit in a nondescript building, the kind where neighbors kept to themselves and secrets festered behind thin walls. This was the residence of Liang Zhaoping, the man who matched the description of the butcher of the Great Wall Hotel. The detectives knocked. A moment later, the door creaked open, but it was not the suspect who greeted them. Instead, an elderly man with a weathered face and a confused expression peered out. He identified himself as Liang Zhaoping's uncle. The apartment was small, filled with the stale air of unwashed clothes and cigarette smoke. Detective Chen scanned the room, his eyes darting from corner to corner. The uncle claimed he knew nothing of his nephew's whereabouts, insisting that Liang was out working. But as the detective prepared to leave, something caught his eye. Sitting atop a bunk bed in the corner of the room was a suitcase. It looked out of place, too neat, too ready. Detective Chen pointed to it. "What is inside that case?" The old man shifted uncomfortably. "I do not know," he stammered. "It is not mine." "Is it your nephew's?" Chen pressed, stepping closer. "Yes," the uncle admitted, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Open it." The uncle shook his head. "I cannot. I do not have the key." Detective Chen was done playing games. He didn't care about the key. He grabbed a tool and pried the lock open with a sharp crack. The lid popped up, revealing the contents that would blow the case wide open. Inside, neatly packed, was a trove of damning evidence. First, they found the identification cards. One belonged to Liang Zhaoping. The other belonged to the victim, Liu Fumin. Tucked alongside the IDs was an intimate photograph of the two of them together, smiling, a chilling memento of a relationship that had ended in butchery. But there was more. The suitcase contained the very clothes Liu Fumin had been wearing on the night she disappeared, and at the bottom, wrapped carefully, was a sharp knife. It was the kind used for slicing meat, clean now, but ominously suggestive of the tool used to deconstruct a human face. Just as the detectives were processing the magnitude of this discovery, the silence of the apartment was shattered by the shrill ring of a telephone. Everyone froze. Detective Chen's instincts screamed that this was him. It had to be Liang Zhaoping calling to check in. Thinking quickly, a detective pulled his service revolver from his holster and leveled it at the uncle. He gestured silently to the phone, his eyes commanding the old man to answer. "Pick it up," he mouthed. "Act normal." The uncle's hand trembled as he lifted the receiver. "Hello?" It was indeed Liang Zhaoping on the other end. But the police had underestimated the bond of blood. Instead of playing along, the old man suddenly shouted into the receiver, his voice cracking with panic. "Police! The police are here! Run! Run now!" He slammed the phone down before the detective could stop him. The line went dead. Detective Chen cursed under his breath. He immediately radioed headquarters to trace the call and lock down the area, but the damage was done. Liang Zhaoping, realizing the net was closing in, vanished instantly. He was now a fugitive on the run, armed with the knowledge that the police had found his kill kit. The manhunt exploded across Hong Kong, but while the police scoured the city for the killer, the family of the victim had a more somber duty to perform. On the morning of August 22nd, Under a gray and weeping sky, Liu Fumin was laid to rest at the Hungham Cemetery. It was a spectacle of grief and horror. Dozens of reporters swarmed the funeral procession, their flashbulbs popping like lightning, desperate for a glimpse of the coffin. The funeral was heartbreaking for a specific, gruesome reason. Although the police had recovered the facial features and organs from the air conditioning unit, they could not release them for burial. Those pieces of Liu Fumin were still considered vital forensic evidence. This meant the family had to bury an incomplete body. Inside the funeral home, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of incense and the sound of wailing. When the time came to pay final respects, the coffin lid was opened. The sight was enough to traumatize even the most hardened observers. Liu Fumin, once a beauty of Kowloon, was unrecognizable. Her face was a concave ruin. Her eyeballs bulged from sockets stripped of lids. Her teeth were exposed in a permanent, skeletal grin because her lips were gone. Gaping black holes marked where her nose and ears had once been. The brutality of her final moments was frozen in time. The grief of the family soon turned to a seething, supernatural rage. Just as the pallbearers prepared to lift the coffin onto the hearse, Liu Fumin's younger brother suddenly broke through the crowd. He was holding a heavy kitchen knife. The mourners gasped, thinking he might harm himself or someone else. But the brother rushed straight to the coffin. Muttering an incantation under his breath, a prayer of vengeance, he stopped at the foot of the casket. With a guttural scream, he drove the point of the knife hard into the wood of the coffin lid. This was not a random act of violence. In Hong Kong, this is a specific ritual rooted in Maoshan Taoism, known as nailing the coffin or dividing the coffin. The belief is ancient and terrifying. By nailing a sharp object into the coffin of a murder victim, the family is attempting to trap the soul inside the earthly realm, preventing it from moving on to the afterlife. The goal is to weaponize the ghost. The spirit, unable to rest, will transform into a vengeful wraith that will hunt down its killer relentlessly. The brother was not just burying his sister, he was unleashing a supernatural hitman upon Liang Zhaoping. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, what happened next defies logical explanation. The very next night, August 23rd, less than 24 hours after the knife was driven into the coffin, a strange event unfolded on the dark streets of Kowloon. It was late. A female police officer was patrolling a quiet alleyway near number 131 Keelung Street. The silence was broken by the sound of stumbling footsteps and labored breathing. She turned her flashlight beam down the alley and saw a man sprawled on the ground. He was in bad shape. Blood was gushing from his nose, and he had a severe head wound, as if he had taken a massive fall. He was trembling violently, his eyes wide with a terror that seemed to go beyond physical pain. As the officer approached, the man began to scream, "Ghost! There is a ghost! Help me!" The officer tried to calm him down. "What happened? Did someone attack you?" The man grabbed her arm, his grip desperate. "She pushed me," he gibbered. "A woman in a red dress. She was chasing me. I ran to the roof. She pushed me off." The officer looked up. The building was high. If he had fallen from the roof, he should have been dead. Yet here he was, bleeding but alive, raving about a woman in red, the color traditionally associated with vengeful spirits in Chinese folklore. She radioed for an ambulance. The man was rushed to Kwonghua Hospital for emergency surgery on his head wound. In the emergency room, as doctors cut away his clothes to prepare him for the operation, the police officer began to catalog his personal effects. She reached into the pocket of his blood-stained shirt and pulled out a wallet. Inside, she found a photograph. It was a picture of a woman. The officer flipped it over. On the back, handwritten in ink, were two large characters, Jinling. The officer froze. Jinling was the professional name of Liu Fumin, the victim of the Great Wall Hotel murder. But there was something else written on the back of the photo, a small, cryptic phrase that read, "Skin and flesh have been changed." It was a sick confession, a reminder that he had altered her appearance to hide his crime. The officer dug deeper into the wallet and pulled out an identification card. The name on the card read Liang Zhaoping, the fugitive. The man who had butchered a woman and vanished into the city had effectively turned himself in. He had been found not by a detective's dragnet, but by a fall that he claimed was caused by the ghost of his victim. After recovering from surgery, Liang Zhaoping was formally arrested. Confronted with the suitcase found in his apartment and the photo found in his pocket, his arrogance crumbled. He confessed to everything. In the interrogation room, Liang laid out the timeline of the murder. He had known Liu Fumin for over a year. He was obsessed with her. He frequently visited the salon where she worked, spending all his money to book her time. He claimed he was in love with her and had repeatedly asked her to quit her job and marry him. But Liu Fumin was a pragmatist. She had a mother and 2 daughters to support, and Liang Zhaoping was a man with no money and no prospects. She had rejected him time and again, telling him that their relationship was purely transactional. On the night of the murder, after checking into the Great Wall Hotel, Liang had proposed to her one final time. He begged her to be his wife. Liu Fumin, perhaps tired of his delusions, snapped. She allegedly mocked him, telling him he was poor and worse, that he was sexually inadequate. She told him he wasn't enough of a man for her. Those words destroyed him. Fueled by alcohol and a bruised ego, Liang Zhaoping snapped. His love turned instantly into a murderous rage. "If I cannot have her," he told the detectives, "no one will." He attacked her in the hotel bed, strangling her until she stopped moving. But death was not enough to satisfy his hatred. As he looked at her lifeless body, he remembered her insults. He hated the face that had rejected him. "I hated her," he said, his voice rising in excitement during the interrogation. "I hated that woman. She was cheap, but she acted like she was too good for me." To ensure that no one would want her and to hide her identity, he took a knife and began the gruesome work of removing her face. He sliced away her features, depersonalizing her, turning the woman he supposedly loved into a faceless slab of meat. When the detectives asked him about his capture, about the fall, and the woman in red, Liang Zhaoping's demeanor changed. The arrogance vanished, replaced by genuine fear. He touched the bandages on his head. "It was her," he whispered. "I am a Catholic. I believe in spirits." She came back. She was wearing red. She chased me off that roof. Whether it was a guilty conscience manifesting as a hallucination, or the result of the brothers' coffin-nailing ritual, Liang Zhaoping believed he was being hunted by the dead. The case of the Great Wall Hotel murder went to trial in the Supreme Court of Hong Kong. It lasted more than 6 months. The prosecution painted Liang as a cold-blooded monster who killed out of jealousy and spite. However, Liang's defense team took a different route. They submitted 2 psychiatric reports claiming that while Liang was not insane, he was suffering from diminished responsibility at the time of the killing due to severe intoxication from alcohol and drugs. They argued he had lost his mind temporarily. The jury, swayed by the psychiatric evidence, returned a verdict that shocked the public. On April 5, 1975, the High Court of Hong Kong prepared to deliver the final chapter in the gruesome saga of the Great Wall Hotel murder. The atmosphere in the courtroom was electric with anticipation. The public, the press, and the family of Liu Fumin had waited months for this moment, expecting a judgment that matched the severity of the crime. After all, this was not a simple crime of passion. It was a butchery. The defendant, Liang Zhaoping, had not only strangled a defenseless woman, but had methodically dissected her face and body to erase her identity. To the average citizen, this was the definition of a cold-blooded monster. However, the legal system operates on technicalities, not just moral outrage. Throughout the trial, the defense team had mounted a vigorous argument centered on the concept of diminished responsibility. They did not deny that Liang killed Liu Fumin. The evidence, the suitcase, the knife, the confession was irrefutable. Instead, they attacked the concept of intent. They argued that Liang was a man pushed to the brink by rejection and fueled by a toxic cocktail of alcohol and narcotics. They presented psychiatric reports suggesting that in his intoxicated state, his mind was so clouded that he could not form the specific malice aforethought required for a murder conviction. In the eyes of the law, if he didn't fully understand what he was doing at the precise moment of the strangulation, it wasn't murder, it was manslaughter. The jury, comprised of ordinary citizens, was tasked with weighing the horror of the act against the strict definitions of the law. They deliberated, wrestling with the gruesome facts and the psychiatric defense. When they returned to the courtroom, the silence was deafening. The foreman stood up and read the verdict. Not guilty of murder. A gasp rippled through the gallery. But the foreman continued, guilty of manslaughter. The distinction was subtle in legal terms, but massive in its consequences. By downgrading the charge to manslaughter, the jury had essentially agreed that Liang was not fully in control of his actions when he snapped. The presiding judge, bound by the sentencing guidelines for manslaughter, handed down the punishment. Liang Zhaoping was sentenced to 10 years in prison. 10 years. For a life taken, for a face stolen, for a mother torn away from her children, and a family left with a sealed coffin. When the sentence was read, all eyes turned to the defendant's box. Most expected to see relief, perhaps even remorse. Instead, witnesses described a reaction that was far more chilling. Liang Zhaoping smiled. It was a smile of supreme satisfaction. It was the smirk of a predator who knew he had beaten the system. He had committed an atrocity that terrified an entire city, yet he would be a free man while he was still young enough to start over. He had silenced the woman who rejected him, and the price he had to pay was merely a decade behind bars. That smile haunted the family of Liu Fumin more than the verdict itself. It was a final insult to the victim. The brothers' ritual of nailing the coffin had succeeded in driving the killer out of hiding the ghost, had done its job, but the earthly court had failed to deliver the ultimate retribution. In the aftermath of the trial, the Great Wall Hotel became a landmark of infamy. The room where Liu Fumin died carried a stigma that no amount of cleaning could scrub away. Guests reported feeling uneasy. Rumors of strange noises and cold spots circulated for years. Eventually, the hotel owners, desperate to distance themselves from the Faceless Corpse narrative, renovated the property and changed the name. They tried to bury the history under fresh paint and new signage, but for the locals of Kowloon, the memory of what happened in Room 5 remained etched in the concrete. The case of the Faceless Corpse faded from the headlines, but it left a dark legacy. It became a grim reference point for Hong Kong criminology. Tragically, it was not the last time such brutality would occur. In the years that followed, other killers would adopt similar methods: dismemberment, mutilation, and the disposal of bodies in small, confined spaces, leading to a terrifying trend in the city's criminal history. Liang Zhaoping had unwittingly become a pioneer of a specific brand of urban horror. But beyond the gore and the ghost stories, this case shines a harsh, uncomfortable light on a segment of society that often goes unnoticed until it is too late: the sex workers of Hong Kong. Liu Fumin's tragedy was not just that she was murdered, it was that she was vulnerable in a way that made her an easy target. She was a fallen woman in the eyes of 1970s society, a single mother struggling with debt, forced into the shadows to survive. The hidden tears of the sex trade are often ignored by the mainstream public until they wash up on a police blotter. The source of this vulnerability lies in the legal gray zone of prostitution itself. In many societies, including Hong Kong at the time, the act of selling sex exists in a precarious space. It is often technically illegal or surrounded by laws that drive it underground. This illegality acts as a shield for predators. Because the industry operates in the dark, the workers cannot rely on the police for protection. If a client becomes violent, if a date turns into an assault, the women are often too afraid to report it, fearing they will be the ones arrested, killers like Liang Zhaoping know this. They know that these women are isolated. They know that if a sex worker goes missing, society might be slower to react, slower to care. Liu Fumin broke the rule of the outcall because she was desperate for money to pay her rent. She walked into that hotel room not because she was greedy, but because she had a mother and 2 daughters depending on her. She entered a space where she had zero control, entrusting her safety to a man who viewed her as a commodity he could purchase and ultimately destroy. The verdict of manslaughter can be seen as a reflection of this societal bias. Would the jury have been so lenient if the victim had been a wealthy socialite or a school teacher? Or did the fact that she was a massage girl subconsciously suggest that she had placed herself in harm's way? It is a question that, uncomfortable to ask, but necessary to consider. Liang Zhaoping's defense that she mocked his poverty and his manhood was accepted as a mitigating factor. The court essentially validated his rage. It accepted the narrative that a man's bruised ego is a powerful enough drug to excuse, partially, the butchering of a woman. The case of the Faceless Corpse serves as a brutal reminder of the consequences of this marginalization. When we push a violent industry into the shadows, we create a hunting ground. Illegality breeds illegality, as the saying goes. When the law turns a blind eye to the safety of sex workers, it inadvertently rolls out a red carpet for monsters. Liu Fumin's life ended in terror, her face stolen by a man who claimed to love her. But her story remains relevant today. It forces us to look at the intersection of poverty, desperation, and violence. It challenges us to question a justice system that allowed a butcher to smile as he was led away. The ghost may have pushed Liang Zhaoping off a roof, exacting a small measure of cosmic justice, but the earthly scales remained unbalanced. The Faceless Corpse of Kowloon is not just a ghost story. It is a tragedy of a system that failed to protect the vulnerable and a legal system that failed to punish the wicked. This brings us to the end of the Faceless Corpse of Kowloon. It is a case that blends forensic horror with supernatural mystery. But at its core, it is a story about the devastating vulnerability of those living on the margins of society. Liu Fumin fought to survive for her family, only to be met with a violence that defies comprehension. If you found this deep dive compelling, please hit that like button and subscribe to Case X. We are dedicated to bringing you the most immersive true crime stories from around the world, adapted for a global audience. I want to hear your thoughts on the controversial verdict. Do you think the jury was right to accept the diminished responsibility defense, or was the 10-year sentence a miscarriage of justice? And more importantly, does the illegality of sex work create a dangerous environment that protects predators rather than the workers? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'll be reading them. Until next time, stay safe, and remember to check the shadows.